this heat, dust, and isolation remain the perception of agriculture. However, in the 21st century, agriculture is an exciting, high-tech sector that feeds the world.
Hi there, Angelo. It's wonderful for you to join us, and we really appreciate you taking time to chat to us. You've had quite an incredible career in the agricultural sector, and it's really an honor for us to have a moment to chat to you, and we'd love to hear your story. How did you get involved in the agricultural sector? What's your background? Please share with us.
For those that don't know.
Thanks very much, Louise. Yes, it's been a fantastic journey in agriculture. I got into agriculture by default, but for those that don't know, my current role is I'm the chairperson of the National Agricultural Marketing Council. I own a company called Petropolis Advisory Services that's mainly focused on assisting clients in the agricultural sector. I also serve on the boards of Hortgrow, Casidra as a non-executive director, and I serve on the boards of 4 other private sector companies as a chairman and non-executive director. So my day is currently filled with board meetings and client consultations, but I'm also in the second half of my career. I spent a good almost 30 odd years in the corporate sector. Most notably, I was with Capespan for 20 years. Capespan, obviously the big fruit exporter based in Bellville. And, you know, on my journey, I was also the chairperson of the Perishable Products Exports Control Board for a period of 6 years. I served on the Wesgro board for 3 terms as a non-executive director, the Western Cape Trade and Investment Promotion Agency. I was fortunate to also be involved with the Ceres Fruit Growers to serve there as a non-executive director. So I've had a very diverse career in the agri sector, and obviously were able to make lots and lots of linkages over the last 25 plus years while I was in the in the agricultural sector. So perhaps I should maybe take you to the beginning as to how I got involved in the agri sector, because it wasn't planned at all. As I mentioned earlier, it was by default. I obviously come from a very disadvantaged background. I was schooled in the tumultuous 80s. And in 1985, I don't know if you recall, but there was a general shutdown of schools in South Africa. And I was in that time standard 8. And basically our school was closed for a year, got promoted to standard 9, and I had to drop maths and science. And maths and science, and there's a reason I'm telling you the story about dropping maths and science, because obviously, you know, to matriculate, you know, the thinking at the time was it was probably easier to do academic subjects with the disrupted schooling. I dropped maths and science and obviously did academics subjects, matriculated in 1987, and then went to the University of the Western Cape. I was completely ill-prepared for university life. My schooling didn't necessarily have the grounding, and I think at the time I enrolled for a BA degree, you know, in teaching. Obviously, I got involved in student politics at the time, and I spent 4 years unsuccessfully at the University of the Western Cape.
Unsuccessfully.
It also dawned on me that, and at that stage, the slogan was liberation before education.
Yeah.
So we were very, very disruptive of other people who wanted to study. And in hindsight, I think that was perhaps not the best strategy. I'm a firm believer that education leads to liberation, and definitely not the other way around.
So it's very similar. It's very similar to what's happening now again.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I believe that your education is key, no matter what. That's the one thing that nobody can take from you. So I then realized that if I don't make a plan, I'm going to be trapped in the sort of menial labor jobs, etc., etc. So I started studying part-time. I quite enjoyed the people side of it, so I got a qualification in human resources management. Joined a company by the name of Intech at the time. Excuse me, as the HR manager, and then I left after about 8 years, and I joined a company by the name of Boeresake in Bellville in 1999, and that was my first sort of touch point with agriculture. For me, agriculture was always an industry, that belonged to kind of white farmers. It wasn't something that naturally came to me. It was kind of a place where I viewed it as an industry where people are exploited, abused, etc. So I was kind of sort of filled with fear in terms of joining the sector. What would my colleagues and friends say over the I'm in the agri sector? And I joined Boeresake. And wow, what an awesome experience it was. I found absolutely the opposite. I found people that were, as they say, salt of the earth, hardworking, and really working very hard to produce food and put, a product on the table under very difficult circumstances. And I think that's where kind of my real love for agriculture started, sort of getting involved, trying to understand a bit more, because, they were basically a cooperative who supplied inputs to farmers. So I became very interested in the value chain. And that was my sort of foray into agriculture.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Wow. What a journey.
But listening to that journey now, and the fears and the doubts and things that you had, do you think that the youngster still today has got the same fears and doubts and beliefs that you might have had back then when you started?
Yeah, look, I mean, I still experience it. I mean, I would love the youth to come into agriculture. I think that there's been a concerted effort made by the agricultural industry to make sure that they attract young people. Now, often the term used is that agriculture is not sexy.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, agriculture to me is very sexy. If you look at some of the stuff that you've got to do. So I think that there's a idea when you talk about agriculture, you talk about a big guy like me with a big belly sitting in a bakkie driving around looking for trouble with everybody. But that's not agriculture. I mean, I've never worked on a farm in my life. I mean, I'm a director of a number of farming companies, but I've spent most of my life in agriculture. So agriculture offers a lot more than just the technical production side. I mean, there's branding, there's marketing, there's logistics, there's supply chain, there's research and development, there's innovation. So it's got such a lot to offer young people. And I think we perhaps in agriculture should, in addition to the efforts that we are making at the moment, try and do a lot more to attract young people to the sector, because it's not about working on a farm. It's about creating impact, being part of the value chain, and really being globally competitive, because South African agriculture competes globally and it performs on the global stage without sort of subsidies and and the normal things, producers in other countries would receive. So I'm very passionate and excited about agriculture. And wherever I go in the different forums I serve, I really encourage the youth to get involved. Initially you can get involved in terms of employment, but nothing would stop you at some stage from starting your own enterprise, your business, getting a piece of land, to start farming. It's just a very exciting sector to be in.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Amazing. And then we kind of interrupted you on your journey. You said you joined Boeresake, and from there, what developed after that?
Yeah, so from there, I got approached by somebody who was looking for an HR manager at Capespan at the time. And I must admit, I didn't know Capespan at the time. They had just formed after the merger of Unifruco, which is the citrus, old citrus board, and Outspan, which was the old citrus board, and Unifruco, which was the deciduous fruit board, to form Capespan. And because I was getting this real interest in agriculture, I decided to join Capespan, the fruit industry. And I remember initially making a comment to somebody saying, I just see myself being, with a company for 3 years, and then I intend moving on to, I suppose, higher, better, greater things. And the person at that stage said to me something very interesting. And in fact, his name is Piet Geldenhuys, and
yes.
And he's passed away now. But I mean, I learned a lot of I got a lot of golden nuggets from Piet.
Yes.
And Piet said to me at the time, he looked at me and he said, young man, the fruit industry gets under your skin. You will be here for 20 to 25 years. You won't make money, lots of it. You live okay, but you won't be able to explain it. And I just want to say that Piet was right. I mean, I ended up staying with Capespan for 20 years. And, the making the bit of money isn't quite true. I was well rewarded and I could look after myself and my family. But it was a stellar journey that I thoroughly enjoyed. I initially joined in an HR role. And then after about a year, I started working with the group managing director as his assistant and the chairperson that time, Dr. Paul Kluwer. And I got involved with development projects and land reform at that stage. And that's really what piqued my interest in development in terms of linking land reform beneficiaries, taking people out of poverty, driving sustainability in terms of production practices, and opening global markets for products from South Africa, because what Africa and South Africa needs is trade and not aid, and we tend to get people to come in and want to throw donor money at us. But, we need to be developing enterprises. We need to be able to sell our products. We need to get into new markets because that will create more jobs. And I just love, being involved in that space for the better part of 20 years. I mean, I've had some fantastic projects that we completed in Namibia, all over South Africa, in terms of structuring land reform partnerships with commercial growers, emerging farmers. And a lot of those projects are still in existence today. And they, they are, as I say, they are fully graduated. They are now farmers on their own. So it's been a very, very exciting journey. Obviously, the journey itself, took me to a number of touch points. I was able to deal with the International Finance Corporation in Washington. I got quite a big grant from them to facilitate land reform in South Africa, to serving on the board of Westra and the PPCB to assist with trade and investment. So it was a mixed bag. I can't quite explain it, but it wasn't the typical agricultural career, in terms of, you're in the production side. The one day I would be in a board meeting, on a farming company that we own, and the next day I would be in a board meeting for the logistics company that we owned. So it was really very, very wide. And really why I'm sharing this is if there's any particular young people, you can come into the sector and find your niche. I'm sure that there will be a niche for you and your skills. It's about taking the commitment to come into it and to say, look, it might not look sexy, but let me explore it at least.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, indeed. And the years that you're talking about that you were in Capespan were very much the transition and transforming years. And I think to have been at the forefront of that must have been incredibly stimulating. And all the boards that you've served on and currently still serve on, you must have your ear to the ground in many of these sectors and kind of see trends and see how things have changed. I can imagine it's been incredibly stimulating and rewarding.
No, look, it's been very, very rewarding. I've obviously, learned a lot over the years, and it's amazing. The younger you are, you come in the sector, you think you know a lot, and when you sort of get to my age, and I'll give my age away in the 50s, sort of early 50s, you kind of look back and you realize you knew very little, and people were just being very kind to you in terms of understanding where you were coming from. So for me, it's been a very exciting transitory period in terms of moving from a regulated environment to a deregulated environment with lots of competition, and having to compete in terms of being the best. And the industry had to consolidate because there was really no place to hide anymore. If you wanted to perform on the world stage, you have to deliver product to your required specification, the required market in time, and you've got to do it profitably. And it's become a lot more difficult to do it in the current environment. I think the farming trend you were talking earlier is farmers are under immense pressure. Politically, they're under pressure from economic and environmental factors. So I see a lot of farmers going to what's termed precision farming, where we are very, very careful as to how we farm. We use the latest technology. We use drones, again, a new career opportunity, drones in farming, and basically making sure that our business is run on a highly scientific basis, as opposed to perhaps the traditional farming we knew 40, 30 years ago. I think that has completely disappeared. It's now about, being transparent in supply chains, making sure that, we use AI technology in terms of how we identify product. Man, I tell you, it is just so exciting to be in farming, despite the challenges that we face at the moment. We've proven in South Africa that our agricultural landscape, our farmers are resilient with COVID, with the Ukrainian war. South African agriculture still performed, even facing all these odds. And I often say, people have got to thank a farmer if they're eating, because your food doesn't come from Woolies or Pick n Pay or any of these places. If you're eating, thank a farmer. And I don't think that they necessarily get the required acknowledgement and credit for the phenomenal work that they do for South Africa. Yes, it's only 3% of the economy these days in terms of its size, but farming employs a hell of a lot of people, and it's been one of the foremost job creators in the South African economy. So it still plays a very, very important role, and I believe it will continue to play an even more important role in the future. And obviously through the work I do with the National Agricultural Marketing Council, to collecting levies, and 20% of those levies is spent on transformation, is to grow the sector. Because if we grow the sector, and we grow the cake, we create prosperity, we create more jobs, we make more money, people's lives get better. And that is how you change any country and economy, is by, growing and trading doing stuff that adds value and not doing stuff that's not adding value.
For sure.
Interesting now, because you've been in it so long and you've been involved with so many different things. If you look back now to 1999, how long is that? That's
it's a long time.
Years.
Yeah, it's a long time. If you think back as to what you had access to back then in terms of technology and all the stuff that's about now, AI, if you think back, if you could have had all that stuff back then, how different it would have been. So going forward, I would say the next 25 years is going to be incredible.
You know, I'm not sure whether it's a question, but it's a big statement that you're making. The challenge with technology is to use it to benefit society, and I've seen that technology improving, obviously, processes and practices in the agricultural landscape. You know, you look at AI, the way it's, for example, used in pack houses. You look at drones to fly over orchards and vineyards. You know, take a pic, they can identify which area is under production, why it's under production. You can go down and measure the production per tree. So I think, you know, if we had it back then, obviously we would have been a lot further down the line. I think the fact that we've got it available is certainly going to assist businesses to run more efficiently. Yes, we will shed some jobs because some jobs will be lost to AI, but I think we will create new ones. You know, I think people were fearful when the calculator came out and, you know, maths teachers were saying, but people are not going to be able to count for themselves. Yeah. So I personally love it. I believe we should adopt it, but we should adopt it to do the good things. You know, unfortunately, these things you can adopt, obviously, to do the wrong things as well. But I'm personally very excited that it's going to add a lot of value to the sector, and I'm hopeful that it will contribute to solving the many challenges we have as a society, you know, beyond agriculture. I would like to see technology being used more for the greater good, but it's certainly being used very excitingly in the agri sector. And I think there's probably, you guys have a next chat with somebody about specifically AI. I'm sure we can probably talk for hours just in how we are currently using it and how we are going to continue using it into the future.
Yeah. So I think that you must be it's actually an incredible privilege. Like we have the privilege of speaking to people like yourself and going to and speaking to the CEOs of big companies and things like that. For you to go and be on the boards of all these different organizations, you must be exposed to a whole lot of things which other people collectively, there must be a lot of information that you get and trends that you can see, which people that are just doing their own little thing in their own space don't see. It must give you a vision beyond what other people have. And I mean, if you're looking down into the future for South African fresh produce, have you what comment do you have on that?
Yeah, Louise, thank you. A very, very interesting observation. So yes, I do have a fantastic worldview because being able to, or being privileged rather, to serve on all these boards and sort of roles that I'm doing at the moment has actually been by design. You know, when I decided to move out of corporate, one of the key things that I wanted to do was to give back to the agri sector. And I said, how can I give back in a way that will enhance my impact? Because Angelo on my own, I'm just one person. But if I serve on boards, I have a greater reach. I can influence policy. I can advise the minister. So it was a design strategy of mine to move into areas where I can have greater reach to influence. So that was the the first consideration. The second one was to be able to make connections between organizations and people, because in South Africa, we only really collaborate in crisis. We don't collaborate to get ahead. And I wanted people so I'm forever connecting people and say, that organization must talk to that organization, and try and set up collaboration, because it's for me, it's about South Africa against the rest of the world. It's not about, sibling rivalry in-house. I think we've got to get past that. And unfortunately, I see a lot of that still in South Africa. But so for me, it's about taking my different platforms, my worldview, and making, connections to collaborate and thereby creating a greater impact. What does it hold in for the sector? So I think there's going to be further consolidation. I think mega farmers will get bigger. I think technology will continue to play a much bigger role. Given the current political dispensation globally, even in South Africa, there will be a lot more independence. I see the agri-sector doing a lot of things for themselves, which perhaps in the past was done by different agencies or even government. I think that there's going to be a greater focus in making sure that we determine our own destiny in the agricultural space, because at the moment the world is just too volatile, and we've got to control what we can control and invest in the areas we can control, and strongly influence the areas that we cannot control. And those areas are water, to an extent government policy, government infrastructure that we require in the sector to obviously make sure that the sector grows. I think there will be greater interaction between government and the sector. I know in the media it's not reported like that, but the agricultural sector is very resilient. They're not afraid to state their opinion. They're not afraid to engage, and they're also not afraid to do it on their own. So I think in the long term, I see a lot of focus on research and development, technological innovation, and use of technology in production practices, in research, in logistics, etc. And I firmly believe that, from a food security point, we are in a good space, provided we are able to supply electricity, keep the harbors working, etc. But I believe that it's a very, very exciting future space.
Okay, that's a very inspiring answer, and it makes one excited to look down the road into the future. And all those young people that you're wanting to come into agriculture, they better come, because we're going to need them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Then
because the women with the boekpens are retiring.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you spoke about government, and that brings us to your role with the National Agricultural Marketing Council. That's a big one. That's a big job that you have there. And maybe you just want to expand a little bit about what the role of the council is, and what it does, and the role you play there. And I'm sure it can't always be easy.
Yeah, so the National Agricultural Marketing Council is governed by the MAP Act, which is the Marketing and Agricultural Products Act. It reports to the Minister of Agriculture, Rural Development and Land Reform. It's basically got two roles. The one is to advise the Minister on good agricultural policy and practice. The second one is to collect levies on behalf of industries, and 20%, as I've mentioned, of those levies are then spent on transformation, which the NAMC, the National Agricultural Marketing Council, would then monitor and evaluate. And the third role is to conduct research into, obviously, agricultural practices and publish these reports. We obviously monitor the price of agricultural products, foodstuff, how it increases, and we then bring out those reports on a quarterly basis. The NAMC is is staffed mainly by economists, some really and agricultural economists. So a really amazing staff sitting there doing wonderful research. The publications are on the website, and people are welcome to actually access it and read through it, because it's some interesting reading in terms of just being aware of what is happening in the agricultural landscape. Yeah, it's an important role, and it's a role that allows me to very often get the ear of the minister, where I can whisper something that I sometimes don't like, or something that I like. The role of the NAMC is also, to this stage, monitor and evaluate the implementation of the agricultural master plan that obviously is in the media quite a bit, because we are not quite getting out of the blocks with it at the moment.
Okay. I saw on, I think it was either LinkedIn or Facebook, that there's a call for public participation, that there was a new statutory levy that's about to be, that you guys are researching. I think it was with flowers, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so basically what happens is statutory levies are basically collected on behalf of industry. So if you're in the flower industry, you will come to the NAMC and say, listen, where's all the flower growers believe that we would like to collect a statutory levy that's used for research, development, marketing, etc., whatever the case might be. The NAMC then, in terms of legislation, is empowered to obviously allow the industry to collect the levy. They then publish notification in the various media that for example, the flower growers are applying for a levy, and we then have to listen to support or objections, to the levy. It's just not automatic that we will impose a levy. There must be support from the sector or the industry.
Oh, yes.
The most recent one, for example, was the wine industry, and now the horticultural industry.
Okay, very interesting. And then a lot of the stuff that we're asking you is like career and personal all mixed in. You mentioned earlier that you went back to university. Tell us a bit more about that.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So because I've had such a disrupted schooling and university life, I was never in community. When I eventually studied, it was part-time, and that time it was through correspondence, not even email, correspondence, where, in fact, they post your package with study material to you, and it actually still arrived in the post.
I remember a small bit of that. I'm not much younger than what you guys are, but funny enough, my daughter had to send a letter. Now in school they had to cover this whole how the post office works and all this, so they had to send a letter to the opas and omas, and that was 2 months ago, and it hasn't arrived from Worcester to Paarl yet.
Yeah.
So, yes, correspondence used to work in those days. Yes.
Yeah, I'm afraid you won't pass if we had to try that way. So, but anyway, so I wanted to get back into community. Into community. I've always had a passion for reading, developing, but I never studied further, and it's always because I was always busy on some committee, some project. But the one thing that suffered was actual formal further study, further development. And I also wanted to do a program, because it was fairly late in my career, that would set me up for the next phase in my career, but also that I can reflect on. And I found this wonderful program at the University of Stellenbosch Business School, and it's called a postgraduate diploma in leadership development. And basically the program is run over a year. You attend, I think, 4 block weeks of a week each per quarter, or one per quarter. And the program essentially develops your leadership skill. But here's the interesting bit. You basically write a leadership thesis on yourself. So you are the subject of your research. And wow, it took me to places, some of them dark, some of them really, really highlights. But I've had to examine myself and who I was, where I come from and where I was going. And a lot of it was also based on feedback from your colleagues and friends, etc. But a really, really wonderful program that that I ran with. I wrote my thesis. I completed the program cum laude, by the way,
Oh, well
Louise.
done.
And I thought I wasn't really a bright student, but anyway, I surprised myself. And
It's called experience.
yeah, no, and so at the moment I'm busy turning out the academic thesis into my own an autobiography that I'm writing, where I'm sharing my journey and the lessons that I've learned.
Incredible.
And some of the mistakes I've made that I think if people read my journey, then they can perhaps learn from it and not make the same mistakes. It's really been a wonderful experience, and unfortunately for my family, that bug is now bitten, and obviously I'm now getting into the master's program with it, and obviously taking that journey a bit further, and maybe there's a bit of maybe there's a doctorate in it somewhere in the future. You never know.
That's amazing. Yes, it's the journey of life, and sometimes to turn the spotlight inward and see and reflect on yourself and where you've come from and what you've achieved and what you haven't achieved and where you're going is quite remarkable. Especially, you can't do that as a young person. You have to have lived a little to get to the point where you can do that.
No, absolutely, and you've got to have some form of maturity to allow the universe to give you feedback. When we're young and arrogant, we get advice, but we often, don't consider it because, we tend to discard wisdom from older folk. Well, I certainly did it, so let me not speak for other people. And, as you go through life and you get its little knocks and so on, and you learn, and you also learn that, the greatest learning takes place when you're open to it and when you submit to it and when you are willing to learn and grow. And, they say there's no development, such as discovering yourself. There's no turning back after self-discovery. And I think the program has done that for me. I don't want to market the university, but I'm in kudos to them. I think they've really put a great program together. And if people have the chance and opportunity to go and do it, it's a great program to do kind of when you want to reflect on your next phase in life.
And your fellow students, how old were they?
So when I did the program, I was turning 15 that year. Most of them around about late 20s, early 30s.
Okay.
So, but I had a lot of fun. I mean, they were sort of kind of also just hanging on to me because I was showing them all the shortcuts, and I was telling them, that's nonsense. Don't worry about that. So it was really in my case, and I viewed it as a bit of reverse mentorship. We are quick to mentor other people, but we don't want to mentor ourselves, and, if you look at the young people today, the use of technology, I get my daughters to reverse mentor me. I speak to a lot of young people, ask them, how do you do it? How do you see it? And I make decisions taking that feedback as well, because, being the sort of elder doesn't mean that we're sitting with all the wisdom. In fact, we don't.
No, this is true. And something you were saying, I was actually had the question in my mind, and you've now kind of brought it right there. If you go back and you look at where you started, you spoke about your background and where you grew up and the opportunities you didn't really have. And if you look today in your career sphere, you definitely have been a leader and a thought leader for a lot of people. In your closer community and in your extended family, I would imagine that you are also a mentor and maybe sometimes a leader for young people. You probably get a lot of people that come and ask you questions and ask you advice.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, you can't be a leader and not sort of get involved at grassroots level. Part of leadership is to be involved as far as possible. And obviously one of the things that I wanted to do differently was to be able to make informed decisions. And I wasn't able to do that when I was at school. Kind of things happen by default. If I knew that there was this great career in agriculture, maybe I would have studied agricultural science or agricultural economics or whatever the case might have been. So I've gotten involved at grassroots level from a social development side. At the school I was, the high school Belleville South Senior Secondary, we formed a trust to assist deserving students with tertiary studies. The trust is funded by a 99 Rand a month donation by former students. And we have been able to put a number of students through university. And in fact, we pay school fees for some of them that cannot afford it. So obviously that's one initiative that I am very involved in. We have regular talks with the matriculants about university life, about commitment, about careers. And then obviously I also get involved in the social side, with the rugby club, the cricket club, the bodybuilding club, because social capital is what, contributes to social and societal cohesion. And we're not very good with that at the moment. I have moved out of the area where I grew up in. If I can term it now, live in a middle class to upper class area. And if all of us do it and don't give back, what do we leave behind? So we've got to take people with us. And I'm very committed to that. My family is very committed to that. Yes, and I'm an uncle in the business. I talk to the young people. Let me give you a simple example. I have a family WhatsApp group where I have all the young people on it. And I give them once every 2 weeks, we talk on WhatsApp about financial tips for the week.
Nice.
What's the Rand doing? Why is the Rand weakening? Why is the bank, the Reserve Bank, putting interest rates up? So that we spend less, so that we keep inflation in track. It's all the things, the social capital that nobody ever told me, because growing up as a Black South African, we simply didn't have access to those type to that type of information. We didn't have access to those type of people. And I think it is incumbent upon us, where we as executives move into leadership roles, to remember where we come from and give back. So I believe that should be in your DNA. It's in my DNA. I've been very involved with the Cape Span Foundation over the years, being in terms of the development work they're doing. I'm currently heading up the Wardgrow Legacy Foundation, which is a new foundation to promote science and research, additional science and research in the fruit industry, to try and raise funds that we do more of that. If you ask me what's my other passion, that's my other passion. It's to go out and try and make the world a better place, but not handouts, teaching skills, creating trade so that, we grow to a better place. Because I believe that that's sustainable. Nothing else is sustainable, really, if you look at it in terms of, kind of granting, that doesn't really, in my experience, kind of have the effect that it should have. So yeah, no, Louis, very, very important that you, as a leader, give feedback to the communities where you can. And there's an old saying that once you've climbed the corporate ladder, don't kick the ladder away. Keep it up there so that other people can climb it with you. And that is pretty much my philosophy. At the moment, I'm keeping the ladder for other people to climb it. And when they slip, I'm there to catch them. And if I slip, hopefully they'll catch me still. Hopefully.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Really, thanks so much for sharing that. Passion always shows. And it certainly shows in what you have related now. Thank you.
But on the topic of schools, I've got small kids in school. My oldest is now the old standard 2, as we would know it, and that's grade 4. But even these things you talk about, like what you discuss in a WhatsApp group with family members, the kids are not taught that stuff at school. Be it primary school, be it high school, they are still not being taught. And I always say that school teaches you how to be an employee. It doesn't teach you how to be an employer. And
Yeah.
it's an unfortunate fact. And on that topic, have you got a success story of one of these people that you've mentored, or somebody that's gone through the ranks from the bottom up that has become something today?
You know, there's an interesting story. You're talking about school teaching you to become an employee. You know, they talk about the A, the B, and the C students. You know, and it's normally the C students who become the entrepreneurs, and
Yes.
and the A's normally work for them because they have all the brains to work for the C's. But the C's are quite happy to take the risk, and they say the B students work for government. So I don't know how true that is, but
That's
you know,
classic.
yeah.
I had a philosophy at school where I said, as soon as you get an A, people think you're doing well. If you get a B, you are still with a little bit of a push, you can get an A. But as long as you're a C, you're average. Nobody's going to ask questions. But a D is like, nee, jy moet 'n bietjie harder werk nou weer. But a C, nobody asks questions about a C.
Absolutely. You know, so the C's are the entrepreneurs. Just remember that. So yes, look, there are many examples, Louise, but the one that sits with me is an interesting story. When I joined Capespan and got involved with the Capespan Foundation, I was invited to the Oakdale Agricultural High School out in Riversdal. And I still thought, hell, must I drive to Riversdal now? And there was this application from the school principal, Mr. Latsky, about two students that, you know, came from the disadvantaged community that had the potential, you know, that can build a career in agriculture. And he would obviously apply for funding to the Capespan Foundation, and, you know, I went to go and assess it. Anyway, we granted them the bursaries, and every year I would trek out to Riversdal and go and see Franklin, and I think the other one's name was Adrian. And eventually, you know, Franklin was doing well, but Adrian was struggling. And again, it was maths and science, you know, so I can't emphasize the importance of maths and science, you know, starting at primary school level already, you know, to get that under the belt. You know, if you have maths and science, the world's pretty much a better place, and your life might be a lot easier. Eventually Franklin, I think he was in grade 11, said to me that his dream is to actually become a medical doctor and not to, you know, be in agriculture, you know. And I was still saying to him, but you can become a veterinarian and blah, 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 because if you become a medical doctor, I cannot pay your studies.
Yeah.
And it bothered me, you know, and eventually I spoke to the powers that be and said, I've got this bright young student. He doesn't want to be in agriculture. He wants to become a medical doctor. What must I do? And yeah, anyway, I went back to Franklin and we spoke again, and he said he's really got his heart set on becoming a medical doctor. And I said, listen, that's your dream. Go and apply. If you get in, I'll try and find funding somewhere. So I'll pay, you know, I'll continue to pay your fees at Oakdale by the foundation, Capespan Foundation. And long story short, Franklin matriculated at Oakdale Landbouwskool, as well as Adrian. Adrian went into agriculture. But Franklin then went and studied further and became a medical doctor. Last year, Franklin made contact with me, and he was a specialist surgeon at a hospital out in Kimberley. And he contacted me just to say thank you, that I believed in him 10, 12, 15 years ago, and that I didn't persuade him to change his dream based on money. And that one is particularly for me a mentorship or a program where, you know, I could assist somebody by having a conversation, by supporting the dream and saying, even if you don't have the money, you know, we'll make a plan. You know, that just stuck with me. I mean, and Franklin and I, and he's based in Kimberley now, still regularly talk. We're friends on Facebook. And he can now contribute to society. He's now based in an area where there are not a lot of doctors. I mean, he does sterling work. And, I said to him, a while back, man, you're still in agriculture. All of us humans, we're actually animals, at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, to me, that's the one that really kind of stayed with me. And then there's a number of projects I did in agriculture with farming and where people have become mainstream farmers. I remember my friend Andre, what's Andre's surname? Klein Eseljag farm out in the Elgin area. He came back and wanted to acquire a government farm, and I assisted him acquiring a farm through the Plus program.
Andre
and today he's done. Andre Klute, yes. And today he's farming with his sons out there. So, Louise, there's a number of stories. I mean, I saw Andre yesterday at a meeting in Paul. And if one looks back at your life, it's not about you. It's about having been able to serve in a small way to contribute to just making the world a better place.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's always interesting to ask people, how does their job and what they do and come home with, how does it affect your family? When you come home and you talk about agriculture, what does your wife and what do your kids think of this? Has it affected them in any way? Has it influenced them in any way?
Look, they are. I have 2 daughters, by the way, and my oldest daughter is a creative. So
okay.
They're very upset with their father because they say that they unfortunately have my genes and they don't have an inclination for maths and science. And hence I think they use it as an excuse on the creative side. No, my wife has been very supportive over the years. She's been a home executive, often took trips with me when we visit farms, and they share my passion for agriculture. But I'm going to tell you a little secret now that I'm very embarrassed to tell people. So although I work in agriculture, I don't have green fingers. Whatever I plant dies. But if my wife plants it, it grows lusciously. And there's a sort of running joke in the family. You've been in agriculture for more than 25 years, but anything you touch just dies. So they're not sure how it works. And I said, well, that's why I work in the office in agriculture and actually not out in the orchard or in the vineyards.
Somebody needs to push the pens and the papers around.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
no, they're very fortunate about it. Very, very supportive. And, as often as I said, if I had a different journey earlier on, then I might have been a farm owner today. But yeah, that wasn't the journey.
Fantastic. Yes. Yeah, we're coming up on an hour, and we've got we can carry on for a long time more. We've got a bit of a tradition where the previous person asks a question for the next person. You don't know who they are, and you're going to give us a question for the next person also.
And it's fun.
And it can literally be anything. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be agriculture. It can be anything at all. But somebody we spoke to earlier said, and do you think that Africa could affect the world supply of fresh produce going into the future? Africa in general. Talk about all the countries supplying: Zimbabwe, Morocco, Egypt, Kenya, all that. With your ear on the ground with a lot of these things, what do you think is going to happen in, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years from Africa?
Well, yeah, interesting question. So I think Africa is already awakening as a fruit producer, as a producer of foodstuffs. I think Africa requires infrastructure, and once that happens, I think we will be able to produce much better. I think if we become more focused in terms of collaboration, in Africa, we will be able to do a lot more. I mean, let me give you an example. I went to Namibia in 2007, and we started a table grape farm with the Namibian government. The Namibian government tried to do it on their own, and they failed dismally. And they then acknowledged that perhaps it's not a bad idea to get a private sector partner in. And remember, governments generally distrust private sector, and in some cases there are good reason. We came in and we've been farming that farm with the Namibian government for the last, I think we're probably going for 15 years now. 2007, where we now? Yeah, it's almost 20 years. And it's grown from a 400 hectare farm to almost 700 hectares. It's the biggest supply of table grapes, single farm in the Northern Hemisphere. So I believe that Africa has all the potential. If we acknowledge that we need to collaborate and work with partners to enhance and leverage what we've already have. Obviously, Africa requires governance, it requires investment, it requires infrastructure. But I believe that Africa in the next 10 to 20 years can be a giant in the food basket of the world. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Indeed. Yeah, and I think it's going to need to be with the number of people that we've got, and people are going to need food. And Africa is the one place that can really still develop to a large extent. So it's an exciting possibility.
Yeah. And just something I'm curious about with, let's take just the NAMC, for instance. Now that governs all agriculture, not just fresh produce. Am I right?
That's right. Yes.
So if you, let's take citrus and grapes and apples and fresh produce in general out of it. What other sector in agriculture should people start looking at that's there? It's got markets, it's got potential, but there's not a lot of interest in it yet.
Well, that's an interesting question, but I mean, there's quite a number of. I mean, you have your traditional industries, but I mean, cannabis production is a new area that I believe is going to grow significantly. There's the smaller group blueberries, for example, is coming mainstream. There's things like pecan nuts that that's coming online. So there's a number of what I would term niche products that you can significantly grow, because the world is also becoming more aware of moving away from animal-based products to non-animal-based products. And I think, that could be a consideration in the future when you look at where do you invest. The world also wants to eat more sustainably, in the long run.
Thank you.
It will be difficult to give up a scarp choppy.
Yeah, I'm on that page with you. It's just not the same.
I always joke when I have a nice braai. So I invited all my vegan friends.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's been incredibly interesting, and we know that you have a lot of responsibility. So to take the time to chat to us, we really, really appreciate it. And it's really nice to see you again, even though it's just virtually after a very long time. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Thank you very much, and I enjoyed the interview. It's actually a chat. I mean, and I must really thank you for the work that you do in the industry and promoting it, because the more people we reach, the better. And it's such a nice industry. I mean, I cannot speak enough about just appreciating what people do in agriculture, because it's really hard work. It's not for everybody, but it's highly rewarding and satisfying, once you've gotten into the sector. So thanks very much to you two for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Don't disappear. We're going to switch off. We'll end the podcast, but just hang around. We can just chat a little bit.
Because we need your question.
But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.